Surprisingly, over 90% of viewers haven't subscribed yet. If you're enjoying the content, hit that subscribe button. It motivates us to keep creating and helps us never miss an upload. And you'll never miss a story again. The phone call came just after midnight. I was half asleep on the couch, a documentary playing quietly in the background, my glasses slipping down my nose. I almost didn't answer, but when I saw the name on the screen, something in my chest tightened. It was Nolan, my cousin, my closest friend growing up, the guy I used to think of as a brother. We hadn't spoken in nearly 2 years. "Hey," I said, sitting upright. There was silence on the other end, then his voice low and cracked. "She's gone, Sam." I stood up slowly, heart thudding in my chest. "What do you mean?" "I mean, Emily left me. Packed up while I was at work. Took her stuff. Left a note." The room felt suddenly cold. Emily, his wife, my ex-fiancée. The same woman who left me 4 years ago for him. I didn't say anything at first. I just walked into the kitchen, trying to piece together what this call really meant. Why now? "I didn't know who else to call," he said. "I know I have no right—" "I'm listening," I said, even though every part of me wanted to hang up. "She said she was unhappy, that she's felt that way for a long time, that I was too focused on work, that she needed to find herself." I leaned against the counter, staring at the dark window. "Sound familiar?" I asked. He didn't respond, because it was the same line she gave me, word for word, the same script. "I know I messed up," he said after a long pause, "but I swear, Sam, I really thought she loved me." I didn't answer, because I knew that pain, and some lessons can't be softened with sympathy. After a minute, he spoke again. "Do you ever think about her?" I exhaled slowly. "Not like you mean," because the truth was, I did think about her, just not with longing. I thought about how blind I'd been, how quick I was to believe her excuses, how she went from my bed to his without even flinching. When Emily left me, she didn't just walk out of my apartment. She took everything we'd planned, everything we'd dreamed of, and handed it to the one person I trusted most. And they both acted like it just happened, like love was some unpredictable storm they got caught in. No apologies, no shame, just silence and distance. I rebuilt quietly, moved to another city, started over. I told myself I was fine, that their choices didn't define me. But hearing his voice now, broken, unraveling, I realized something I hadn't before. I didn't want revenge, but I also didn't want to save him. We ended the call without promises. He said he'd be in town next week. Maybe we could talk. I said, maybe. Then I went back to the couch and stared at the ceiling until the sun came up. A few days later, he showed up. Not at my apartment, at the bookstore where I worked. He looked older than I remembered. Not in a dramatic way, but in the way people do when their arrogance finally meets real life. He had a beard now, wore a wrinkled hoodie, and had the look of someone who hadn't slept well in weeks. "Can we talk?" he asked, voice low. I nodded, mostly because I wanted to hear what story he'd tell. We sat outside on a bench. He held a cup of coffee like it was keeping him alive. "I should have said something to you back then," he started. "I should have owned it, faced you like a man." "You should have," I said. I thought if we gave it time, maybe things would make sense." "Did they?" He looked away. "No. She left you the way she left me," I said. "You knew that was possible." "I know." Silence stretched between us like a fence. Then he said something I didn't expect. "She cheated on me too, with her boss. Apparently for almost a year." I blinked. She said he listened. Made her feel interesting again, that I was too predictable. The words hit me harder than I thought they would. Because that's what she told me too. That I was boring. That I didn't challenge her. That she needed more. But maybe it wasn't about me at all. Maybe it never was. "She has a pattern," I said quietly. Nolan nodded. "I thought I was the exception. We all do." I didn't invite him in. I didn't offer comfort. But I also didn't spit in his face or tell him he deserved it. Because I had already done the work. I had already moved through the fire and come out the other side. What he was experiencing now, this implosion, I had already survived. But I didn't feel joy at his pain. What I felt was something far more powerful: detachment. He wasn't my enemy anymore. He was just another person who thought love was something you could steal, and learned the hard way that what's built on betrayal always crumbles. After he left, I called in sick and went home, not because I was upset, but because I needed time to sit with everything and acknowledge it. Not shove it down, not bury it. Just recognize what had changed. For years, I had imagined seeing them again, playing it out in my mind, what I'd say, how I'd act, whether I'd forgive or rage or stay silent. And when it finally happened, I realized that I didn't need any of that. The silence was enough. That night, I went through my old things. I found the engagement ring I never returned, still in its box. I'd kept it, not out of sentiment, but because part of me wanted to remember what I once believed in. I stared at it for a long while, then closed the box and put it away for good. I wasn't the man who bought that ring anymore, and that was a good thing. The next day, someone walked into the bookstore and changed the subject of my life. Her name was Tessa. She was new in town, asked for a book I hadn't heard anyone mention in years. She spoke softly but laughed loudly. There was something easy about her, something real. She came back the next week, then again the week after. Each time she stayed a little longer, asked about music, movies, old poetry I hadn't read since college. She didn't flirt. She didn't try. She just was. And that was enough. We had coffee one afternoon, then dinner, then long walks, where the world felt quiet and wide again. I didn't tell her everything, not yet. I didn't unload the past at her feet and expect her to carry it. But she knew, not the details, but the weight. "You've been hurt," she said once. "I've been humbled," I replied. She smiled. That's a better word. With her, I didn't feel like I had to perform. I didn't need to prove anything. I could just exist. And for the first time since everything fell apart, I started to believe that maybe love, real love, didn't have to come wrapped in pain. It could arrive quietly, with no apology, and still be enough. It was early fall when I saw her again. Emily. Not in person, just her name, in the inbox of my old email account, the one I'd stopped checking regularly. The subject line was short: "I owe you the truth." I hovered over it for a moment, unsure if I even wanted to open it, but curiosity, or maybe closure, won. The email wasn't long, 3 paragraphs at most. She apologized, said she knew what she did was inexcusable, that she left a trail of damage behind her, and had convinced herself it was okay, because she was chasing something she called freedom. She admitted she had been selfish, that she never really saw what she had until it was gone, that Nolan didn't turn out to be her happy ending, that her boss, the one she cheated on Nolan with, had ended things the second it became complicated, that she had moved twice since then, changed jobs, tried therapy. "I don't expect forgiveness," she wrote, "but I wanted to acknowledge what I did, to you, to Nolan, to myself. I lied and justified it until there was no one left around me to believe it anymore." I sat with it for a few minutes. Then I closed the laptop and went for a walk. There was a time that message would have torn me apart. I would have reread every word, analyzed her phrasing, tried to imagine her typing it, alone, ashamed, desperate for peace. But now it felt like a quiet door swinging shut behind me. I didn't reply, not because I was angry, but because I no longer needed anything from her. That's what real healing does. It removes the hooks. It doesn't mean you forget. It means you stop bleeding. A few days later, I saw Nolan again. He came by the bookstore. He looked better, less hollow. He told me he'd found a new place and was trying to rebuild. Said he was cutting off contact with Emily for good, that the fallout had forced him to reevaluate everything. "I'm not asking you to forget what I did," he said. "I just want you to know I finally understand what I became." I nodded. "Sometimes the hardest thing we can do," I told him, "is look in the mirror and not flinch." He nodded. Then he left. No hugs, No dramatic goodbyes. Just two men who had been through the same storm, finally stepping out of it in different directions. That weekend, Tessa invited me to a community gathering at a local park. Nothing fancy, just live music, food trucks, neighbors bringing potluck dishes. It had been a long time since I'd said yes to something like that, but I did. She introduced me to people I'd seen around town but never really met. A retired couple who ran the antique shop, a group of high schoolers playing guitar under a tree, a single mom who sold handmade candles, the town librarian who remembered I liked old poetry. And for the first time in years, I felt welcome, not as someone recovering from something, just as me. Later that evening, Tess and I sat on the edge of the lake, feet in the cool water, watching the last light fade behind the hills. "You've been quiet tonight," she said, "just thinking." "About the past?" "Number about how I almost let it define me." She looked at me, eyes steady. "But you didn't." I shook my head. "Number, I didn't." She smiled. "That's rare." I didn't respond right away. Then I turned to her. "You make it easier." We didn't kiss. We didn't hold hands. We just sat there quietly sharing, the kind of stillness that speaks louder than words. A few days later, I took down the last box from the top shelf in my closet. It had Emily's letters, old photos, mementos from a life that had ended long before I'd accepted it. I didn't burn them. I didn't throw them out in anger. I just looked through them one last time, acknowledged the role they played in shaping me, then sealed the box and drove it to the storage unit I rented for things that no longer needed space in my daily life. Some memories deserve a shelf, not a spotlight. When I returned, Tessa was waiting outside my place with a small potted plant. "A peace lily," she said. "They're low maintenance." I laughed. "Are you saying I'm high maintenance?" "No," she said, grinning. "Just that we could all use a little peace in our lives." I placed it by the window. It's still there today, growing slowly, steadily, like something finally rooted in the right soil. That fall, the bookstore hosted its first community open mic night. Tessa convinced me to read something. I almost said no, but I found an old journal entry I'd written the week after Emily left me. It wasn't angry, it wasn't poetic, just honest. So I stood up in front of the small crowd, hands shaking a little, and read it. When I finished, the room was silent. Then, a soft applause. Then, someone came up to me after and said, "That felt like something I didn't know I needed to hear." And in that moment, I realized something important. What I went through wasn't just pain. It was transformation. And maybe, just maybe, the version of me standing here, calm, grounded, at peace, wasn't a rebound from heartbreak. It was the real me, finally uncovered. Later that night, as Tess and I locked up the shop, she said, "You looked different up there, like someone who stopped running." "I have," I said. She slipped her hand into mine. We didn't say anything else. We didn't need to. Because sometimes, the best chapters don't start with fireworks or grand declarations. They start with peace. And peace, I was learning, is the loudest kind of strength. The holidays came with their usual lights, songs, and peppermint-scented distractions. But this year, something about it felt different. It wasn't that anything grand had happened. There was no big breakthrough, no dramatic declaration of love, no sudden windfall of luck. It was quieter than that. And maybe that was the miracle. For the first time in years, I didn't flinch at the idea of December. I didn't feel haunted by old memories of traditions I once held tightly, only to see them slip away with the people who broke them. I didn't feel the ache of missing what I used to have, because now I understood that most of what I missed was built on the illusion of permanence. And illusions, I've learned, don't survive real life. I spent Christmas Eve at Tessa's place. Her sister was visiting with her kids, and the apartment was loud, cluttered, and full of warmth. There was laughter from the kitchen, flour on the floor from a failed batch of cookies, and a tree decorated with a mix of handmade ornaments and hand-me-downs from their grandmother. I stood in the middle of it all, watching, taking it in. I wasn't used to being in spaces that didn't demand anything from me. There was no pressure to entertain, impress, or perform. Just space to be. Tessa caught me staring at the tree and walked over, gently bumping her shoulder into mine. "You okay?" she asked. I nodded. "I'm good. Better than last year?" I laughed softly. "Way better." We exchanged gifts quietly that night, after the others had gone to bed. She handed me a small square package wrapped in brown paper and twine. Inside was a leather-bound journal and a pen with my initials engraved on it. "I figured you're writing again," she said. "I am," I told her, "but mostly in my head. Now you don't have an excuse." I handed her my gift in return, a framed photo of the lake we visited that night in the fall, the one where we sat in silence and watched the sun go down, like it was a friend we didn't want to say goodbye to. "I took it the day after," I said. "Felt like a moment worth keeping." She smiled, touched the frame gently, and said, "I think that's the best kind of love, the kind you notice in the quiet moments." We didn't use that word much. Love. It hung between us like a growing light, not rushed, not claimed, just known. New Year's came and went without much ceremony. I closed the bookstore early and spent the evening at home, making a simple meal and journaling like I used to. When midnight hit, I raised a glass of cider to no one in particular and whispered, "Thank you for the lesson," because that's what the past had become, a teacher, not a punishment, not a curse, just a guide with a hard voice and good intentions. A few weeks into January, I got a letter in the mail. Not an email, a real letter. It was from Nolan. He had moved out west. Said he was doing okay, working at a small nonprofit, spending time hiking, trying to live smaller, cleaner. He said he was in therapy now, something he never would have considered before. Said it was helping. At the end, he wrote, "I still regret what I did to you, but I'm working on becoming someone I'd be proud to introduce to my future self." I read that line twice. It didn't erase what had happened, but it made space for forgiveness. Not the kind where we forget or pretend nothing happened. The kind that says, "You don't get access to me again, but I hope you heal anyway." I wrote back just a few lines. "We both got broken in different ways. I hope you're finding your way out." And that was enough. I didn't need to say more. Closure, I'd learned, doesn't always come in dramatic conversations or perfect timing. Sometimes it arrives in the form of nothing left to prove. February brought snow, then sunshine, then snow again. The bookstore stayed steady. Customers came in for romance novels and poetry. A young couple got engaged in the fiction aisle. One of the high school kids who used to doodle in the corner got accepted to art school. And I stayed still, present. Tessa and I kept walking the line between comfort and something more. We didn't rush to define it, but we both felt the current beneath our feet. Then, one evening while closing up the shop, she turned to me and asked something unexpected. "Do you believe in second chances?" I thought for a moment. "Yes," I said, "but only when the first version taught you enough to deserve it." She nodded slowly as if turning that over in her head. "What about you?" I asked. "Have you needed a second chance?" She smiled. "This feels like mine." I didn't ask what her first chapter looked like. Not yet. She'd tell me when she was ready, but I saw it in her eyes. That familiar resilience, the one you earn when life shows you exactly what you don't want, so you can finally stop chasing it. That weekend, we went to the lake again, this time with a thermos of hot tea and a blanket. The sky was a steel gray, the trees bare and elegant in the winter air. She leaned against my shoulder and whispered, "I like who I'm becoming around you." I didn't say anything back right away, because the truth was, I did too. She didn't fix me, I didn't rescue her. We just met at the right time, when we'd both done the work of sorting through the mess, cleaning out the corners of our hearts, where old pain used to sit like unwanted guests. There's something beautiful about being with someone who knows how to sit in silence with you and not try to fill it. Who knows that healing doesn't mean rushing back into old patterns. It means rewriting the blueprint from the ground up. I never went looking for love again. I just stopped guarding myself from it. And in doing so, I made space for something that didn't need to prove itself. It just was. One morning in early March, Tessa brought over blueberry muffins and found me fixing the hinge on the back door. She leaned against the counter and said, "You know, you're not what I expected." I smiled. "Good or bad?" "Better. You're calm in a way I didn't know I needed." I handed her a screwdriver. "Want to help?" She laughed and took it. And just like that, the moment became ours. No big speech, no music swelling in the background, just a shared task, a shared silence, a shared life beginning in the smallest, most unremarkable way. And that's how I knew it would last. Because anything built slowly, honestly, and without the weight of pretending has a better chance of surviving. The truth is, I don't think I ever wanted revenge. Not really. What I wanted was to outgrow the version of me who needed it. And I did, by choosing peace over performance, stillness over noise, and love. Not the kind that crashes in with fireworks, but the kind that stays without having to be asked.